if loving software monetization is a crime, I guess I'm guilty. But I am very excited for today's sessions. Very happy to introduce and bring to the stage Philip Daus from Simon-Kucher, who's going to be talking about innovative pricing models and how to implement them. Philip?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Philip. And thank you so much for having me again. And I welcome you to my office here. We're at 85 degrees in Houston. It's a muggy Tuesday, and excited to talk about innovative pricing models, and in particular, to talk about token-based pricing or credit-based pricing. So I have about 35 minutes in which I wanted to share some current trends with regard to software monetization. In particular, I wanted to share some of the key strategic elements that we typically think about, maybe as a reminder to some, but it's always good to start with the basics. And then I know Michael is particularly excited about the third piece here, sharing some insights on token-based pricing and how that could potentially help your businesses. And if we have time, happy to discuss some tips and tricks to make the transition between revenue models a little bit easier. Few words about myself. I'm a partner with Simon-Kucher, essentially grew up in the company. I've been with the firm for 21 years. I had our Houston office. I moved to Houston for strategic reasons. My wife is from Texas, but you can hear my German accent. And yeah, we're raising three small Texans. You see the smallest driver here on this picture. And then maybe just a few words on Simon-Kucher as well, in case you haven't heard about us. We are the best kept secret in consulting. We're about 2,000 employees in 46 offices. We started originally in 1985 as a pricing consultancy, but since then have morphed into the #1 growth advisory. And in the software and tech space, we work with over 75 unicorns. We've done over 50 projects just monetizing AI-based offerings as well over the last year or so. We do roughly 1,000 pricing and monetization projects every single year, so quite a bit. But beyond that, also work on the office structure. We help with marketing efforts. We help with everything that has to do with sales. So we call it the sunny side of consulting. So you wouldn't call us for cost cutting and operations necessarily, but we help companies grow the top line. And then the last slide on Simon-Kucher, and then we dive into the topic. But this one is quite interesting, and it's not ours. This one was created by a venture capital company that we've been doing work with, and they did an assessment of several portfolio companies that we've done project work with. And you can see here there are 2 home runs where we essentially knocked it out of the park. But on average, for all portcos, there's something between a 15 and 30% revenue lift, incremental year-to-year revenue lift across all these companies. So news here is, if you work on monetization strategies, there's a lot of money to be had if you do it right. So with that little advertising here, when you go to the movies, you have the ads up front. Same thing here. Let's dive right into software monetization trends. And I'm not going to start with a history lesson, but I will just kind of throw this up here as a little bit of a reminder of where we're all coming from. So I recall when I started my career in pricing in 2004, we were still quite busy just thinking through, on-prem price optimization. And also there were some vendors that started to think about, vendor managed solutions and some type of subscription pricing. And of course, beginning of the 2010s, subscription-based pricing was the big thing that started to come up with the migration to cloud-based offerings. And of course, the benefits are not just what's here on the slide, the predictable relationship with customers and a long-term customer relationship, but particularly this has a massive effect on the multiple of companies, right? So boom of the 2010s. And then we all of a sudden started also seeing a shift towards consumption-based pricing models. So instead of charging by the user, companies starting to charge by usage. Was a little bit challenging beginning of the 2020s when COVID hit, and a lot of folks all of a sudden had zero usage. So of course, the ones that had some type of subscription model were kind of coming out of that crisis in a little bit better position. I think it's one of the reasons why we now see a lot of businesses that have hybrid models, right? Subscription-based pricing and then consumption-based pricing. However, all of this is bound to change, and it has started to change over the last couple of years. with AI coming up. Nicole alerted Gen AI, Agentic AI. The first Agentic AI project I did was end of last year, and nobody knew what Agentic AI is. Now it's become a big buzzword. With that, there are different pricing models that are popping up almost on a daily basis. Also, fun fact, all of a sudden, cost plus pricing is relevant in the software space. I always used to say that software pricing is somewhat different because you have these massive R&D costs, but there's no variable costs that you can use to price anchor your product. So you're essentially forced to do what we would call value-based pricing of some sort, with the appearance of AI and massive variable costs that is bound to change or is changing already. I mentioned a lot of new and innovative pricing models coming up. This is just a long list. It's a collection of innovative pricing metrics of the last 5 or 6 months or so. I'm not going to go through all of these, but you can see companies are getting very, very creative in what they're actually charging for. And we always say, what you charge for is much more impactful than how much you charge. So pricing metric is more important than price level. And you can see a whole bunch of things that companies are trying out. I will say, though, that most of these metrics that you see these days, they are not outcome-based. They're rather some type of units of work completed models. So a few examples. The one that has been probably talked about the most is Salesforce, Agentforce in this particular case, that is charging essentially $2 per conversation. So a customer either confirms that the conversation was successful, or at least they didn't call or reach out to Salesforce again, and that's then a completed conversation. And Salesforce essentially put a dollar on this task of $2, which very quickly, because nobody had a reference point, started to become the new kind of benchmark when it comes to work-based models. Other companies are a bit more creative, I would say, when it comes to pricing. So EvenUp is an AI-powered claims intelligence platform, and they are for your favorite type of company. They're for injury law firms. So essentially, they help with workflow automation and document creations, and they charge based on every demand letter that is accepted by insurance companies or the defendant firm, right? So instead of the lawyer drafting this up, we put it in AI, and then insurance or legal on the other side accepts it. That's what they're charging for. Now, they don't charge for the amount that's kind of here at risk in the legal case. Again, it's more like a work product, but it's quite creative. Zendesk, somewhat similar to Salesforce. So they are a cloud-based customer service and engagement platform that offers a comprehensive suite of tools for automating customer interactions. And here, likewise, successful resolution equates into a fee. And a true outcome-based model is ChargeFlow. So they essentially charge back. So think of e-commerce platforms, and if they enter in a dispute with their customer, somebody is not willing to pay, then ChargeFlow takes over, and they get a cut of all the money that they successfully reclaim, namely 25%. So all of these models are aligned with value to a certain degree, but can be less predictable for companies and customers. And if you wonder, why should we even go this route? We're very happy on our subscription-based model, or some of you I know are still, in the on-prem world. Well, there is a direct link between the economic value capture that your company can achieve and the type of pricing model, the type of revenue model that you deploy. So from 5% for on-prem, roughly 10% for subscription, to all the way up to 30%. And yesterday, actually, I learned about a company that was charging 40% of commissions that they provided leads to sales reps, and they're getting a cut of 40% of the commissions that these sales reps get from the lead. So there are even more aggressive models out there, but it's worthwhile thinking through how to change the revenue model in order to increase your economic value capture. Now, if you say, well, I'm very happy with my 10%, or very happy with my hybrid model that gets me to 10 to 15, well, just know that with AI, if you're currently using some type of user-based or seat-based model, that business model ultimately will have your revenues go down eventually, because of course the number of seats has to go down over time, right? So that's what AI does. It enhances human work. In some cases, it replaces human work. So the number of users, the number of seats that you can charge for is also bound to decrease. So a few comments here: OpenView, seat-based pricing no longer matches how value is created or consumed in modern software. And Bessemer at the bottom, usage-based pricing is well on its way to becoming the standard practice for SaaS businesses. So again, if you want or you don't want to, you ultimately have to revisit your revenue model and really think whether a seat-based, user-based, a subscription model will bring you through the next 5 to 10 years. Now, taking one step back and thinking about what the right revenue strategy is for your business, we learned that 92% of all B2B SaaS companies either have launched or are soon expecting to launch some type of Gen AI feature. Some of them are a bit further and are in the agentic AI world, but we also know that more than half of them actually don't achieve the economic goals that they want to achieve with the monetization model. And that's why I bring this one back up. Some of you might have seen this before, but this is really how we think about developing an ideal monetization strategy. And it starts with the question of, what are you trying to accomplish? And we typically think of it in terms of 3 general goals. Are you trying to acquire new customers? Are you trying to monetize existing customers? Or are you trying to retain existing customers? So in function of, if you're a new company and you want to grow, probably it's more about acquisition. If you have massive churn issues, probably the focus will be a bit more on retain. Now, the focus then also drives how you think about different monetization strategy elements. So, for example, to acquire new customers, you would offer in your product offering more value to new customers. But if you want to monetize, of course, there's less that you can then upsell to, less that you can monetize. So there's a direct conflict from the packaging perspective and function of your strategic objectives. Same is true with the pricing model. So if you want to acquire new customers, you would want to make your overall pricing as simple and straightforward as possible. If it's about retaining customers, well, you want to create barriers to exit. Keep this one in mind when we talk about token-based pricing models, because they're not the easiest ones to understand. So probably not the ones that you would want to think through in all level of granularity if the focus is your customer acquisition, or also if you're a company mainly focused on product-led growth. But again, if you're a bit more mature and you think about, hey, we have all these fantastic products that we want to monetize and we also want to retain customers, fantastic option as well. And then last but not least, this conflict between monetization and retaining customers. The more you raise your prices, of course, the more difficult retention becomes. So we have to think through packaging, the price model and price level first, before we then, pick, for example, a token-based pricing model or any other type of revenue models. Let's double click on these a little bit, starting with packaging. And when we start working with clients, typically 90% of our customers, they are on the either left side of the spectrum or on the right side. So either they offer a whole bunch of features at one price, right? So they started off with something great, developed new features, and had this one price, and whatever they develop, they offer to their clients. So that's all you can eat. Then you have the other extreme, the kind of build your own. Companies have a long list of things that they offer to their accounts with different price points, and then their customers are left with a choice of what they actually want to buy. And typically we end up somewhere in the middle, making this selection, this purchasing process a little bit easier for customers and creating land and expand motions or creating clear upsell paths for existing customers. Why would we not stay at an all-you-can-eat or build your own? Well, if we look at an all-you-can-eat offering, so that's typically, as mentioned, something that younger companies have. Well, it kind of looks at the world in a one segment type of lens. So these are different features and benefits of the software. If you start doing a double click here, you realize, hey, those needs, they differ by segment. Hence, also the willingness to pay differ by segment quite drastically. So you probably can make more money, and you can also probably attract very different customers if you take a segmented approach and bundle features and benefits together that are the right ones for this particular segment. So that's the one end of the spectrum. The other one, the build your own, just to highlight an extreme case. This is a company called SmugMug. So they essentially offer all types of features for hobby photographers that want to sell their pictures or create products with their pictures on it. And this was the starting point. You can see like dozens of very, very technically described features and benefits. We brought this down to much, much more functional and benefit-oriented, good, better, best, and bestest package, if you will. Now, when you design packages, I already mentioned you have to take different segments into account. We typically also look at the benefits by this lens of leader, filler, killer. So leader, filler, killer is an exercise that we do to understand what are the leading items. Leading items are the ones that typically you build a package around. The filler are the items that you use to create an upsell path, and the killer items you really, really want to avoid in any type of package offering. Think of the McDonald's Happy Meal, right? So the leader product would be the burger and arguably the toy. The filler are the fries and the drinks. A killer would be if you throw a coffee in for free, because the target segment does not like coffee, and the purchasing decision makers don't like their kids being caffeinated. So even with a free coffee, you would not enhance the bundle, you would definitely kill it, and parents would discuss at the counter if they could have the Happy Meal without coffee. So packaging extremely, and the offer strategy extremely important before you even think about what is the right revenue metric, what's the right revenue model. Now, when we go into the right revenue model, there's kind of two dimensions here. We typically want to understand what's the benefit to your business, but then also what's the benefit to your customers. And there we find the happy middle. You also want to consider competitive aspects. How can you implement them? What's the cost structure? And also, does this help you to scale? And what does it imply for future development? I'll talk a bit more about metrics in a moment. Hence, last point here is price levels. There are different ways and quite sophisticated ones these days. And tools and methods to measure willingness to pay, to measure acceptable price ranges. So the only message I want to share here is really do your homework, go out to the market, talk to customers and prospects, and really understand willingness to pay and how your product offer and different price points would actually lead to a different customer reaction. And all of that, of course, needs to get modeled out. And you need to understand, okay, where does the revenue come from, right? Does it come from a different pricing metric? Does it come from an upsell path? Are there customers that downsell because all of a sudden I have a cheaper option? Are there customers that churn because I take prices up or because I change my model, and so on and so forth? So really modeling out the impact becomes key. With that intro, again, we need to think about packaging, we need to think about the model, and we need to think about the price levels. Let's deep dive into token-based pricing. And this is an interesting topic. This is actually hot off the press from Gartner, who did a quick analysis on the top 10 enterprise applications. And they came to the conclusion that in the next 2 years, 25% of net new spend will come from token-based pricing or credit-based pricing. Why is it the case? My hypothesis comes from this one. This is a project example where we looked at all the different pricing metrics that our account currently used. And you can see over a dozen of different metrics. And when we started working with them, they actually said, well, we have 5 or 6 others that we would like to test. So this becomes extremely difficult to sell, difficult to handle, and particularly if you have to sell them essentially as a one-off. So comes to the rescue token-based pricing model. And this is how I explain token-based pricing to my kids. If you've ever been to a Chuck E. Cheese or a Dave & Buster's, you know, you buy a power card, right? And you can load this power card with a number of chips, they call it, which is the equivalent of tokens or of credits. And then you can use these credits for different activities. So you can play skeetball. So a swipe gives you 9 balls that you can play with. You can use it for video gaming. There's a number of minutes that you play, or you can pay per game for the games of chance, for example. As you can see, very different revenue models or very different pricing metrics being used on the right side, but you all use them with this one power card. So taking a step back, ultimately, it's an upfront commitment. It's an upfront monetary commitment that gets converted into tokens or credits, potentially with a multiplier. And I'll talk about the multiplier in a moment. And then that gets converted into different services. And different services require a different number of credits. Two interesting pieces here. One is called wastage. So if we can entice customers to buy a few credits extra that they're never going to use, that typically helps us as a business, as long as customers are not unhappy with their extra purchase. And then there's this multiplier, also from a pricing perspective, really, really interesting. Multiplier meaning you could convert $1 into 1 credit, but you could also make that a little bit more differentiated. And also you could then, the credits, you can use this ultimately as a disguised price increase. So if activity A costs $10 now, or 10 credits now, you could raise the price of that activity, for example, by 20%, keep prices or the credits, the multiplier, the same for activity number B, and for C, you could raise required credits substantially more. That's, by the way, also why your kids might say, hey, the games feel a little bit shorter now. But again, it's from a pricing perspective, it's a nice feature to have, another lever that you can play with. And when it comes to the actual pricing models for token-based pricing, we essentially see 3 different models. The first one is a simple pay-as-you-go, so no upfront commitment. Typically, it comes as a premium, and it's good for kind of like a proof of concept, a short-term project, just to get the foot in the water with regards to token-based pricing. Of course, the one that we want to get to, or one of the versions we want to get to, is an upfront committing. Typically, it comes at some type of discount. So, dear Mr. or Mrs. Customer, because you commit up front, we can give you this small discount. They become, of course, somewhat hard to forecast, both for you as a company, but then also for your customer. And there's a wastage risk and an overage risk, meaning customers either buy too much and they have this wastage, or they buy too little and then they have to incur overages. We'll comment on both in a moment. Lastly, what we see are a lot of hybrid models coming up, for example, where a number of credits or a number of tokens is tied to a user. So if you buy 10 seats, or you pay for software with 10 users, that comes with a certain number of credits. But then you can link this together with some type of overage model, which of course is a bit easier to forecast and allows you to monetize extra. Now, underusage and wastage risk. So managing those becomes really, really important, but also really, really tricky. And you have to align on what you're actually trying to do and also how it resonates with your customer. For example, very customer friendly is a full rollover. So if you buy tokens or credits this year in 2025, and there's another new fiscal year, 2026, full rollover means all the credits that you didn't use, you can use next year. Of course, it incentivizes the purchase of massive packages. However, it creates, revenue recognition issues that Michael and I discussed quite a bit already. And there's also, of course, ways to game the system. There's a partial rollover. We say, well, you can only take X amount, X percentage of credits, or we say, hey, you have to pay some type of extra fee for this rollover. So it gets somewhat complicated. Not sure if it's worth the juice is worth the squeeze. And lastly, you could also use, use it or lose it models, which some companies are implementing actually quite successfully. Could lead to customer dissatisfaction if you're not transparent. On the other side, overusage or overage risk. So you could say, hey, once all the credits are being consumed, let's just start a new contract with this customer. Encourage, of course, higher upfront commitment. It locks customers into an annual contract in earlier, and so on and so forth. However, it could operationally become quite complex. Another option would be a true up, right? So customer actually consumes more than he said he would. And here's an extra bill with all the credits that were consumed after the fact. May lead to customer dissatisfaction if it comes out of left field. And also particularly once you change your model in the beginning, the true usage will be hard to predict. So true up has benefits and disadvantages. Or you could essentially offer, to buy additional usage. Again, encourages higher upfront commitment. You might push customers into higher packages, but again, it has its risks as well. Generally, best-in-class companies, they're rather transparent about their models, so they allow customers to actually track usage. So Salesforce they offer super messages and essentially allow you to track online. Klaviyo, it's like a marketing automation platform that focuses on email and SMS marketing. Same thing. Online, you can track your accounts and you can see how you use your credits against emails and SMS messages. And then, Matillion, same thing here. There's an online hub that allows for transparency here. So all of these ultimately create this transparency with the customer. And in some cases, they also trigger sales conversations that create meetings around either upselling a package or selling bigger token bundles. I'm going to skip this one. These models can actually get rather complicated and complex, but they also allow to use some of your classical GPB offerings and add-on offerings. But yeah, just in summary, benefits and disadvantages of token-based pricing models. First one, as mentioned before, it allows for a combination of different revenue models and pricing metrics. Ultimately, that's the key reason why you would go that route. The other one is it also incentivizes trial, right? So you can offer up your entire gambit of features and benefits to customers and leave it to them where they actually want to spend their credits. And you can also get a bit more sophisticated and have promotions on specific features, or which ultimately translate into free credits that are linked to a feature, and that way also incentivize trial. All of that in turn reduces churn, not just because the upfront commitment, so somebody already spent their money, they're determined to stay with you, but because if customers use more of your products and more of your features and benefits, of course, that creates more loyalty as well. Disadvantages, just to name three here. First one is the high complexity. The sale still is pretty complex, right? If you think of your first time at Chuck E. Cheese or Dave & Buster's and you wonder, hey, how much playtime does this get me? Or how much usage do my kids get out of it? And really understanding what this means for a company can be complex and can also slow down the sales motion. Also, the usage and the costs are very difficult to predict, particularly in the beginning. So you need to, if you develop those models, ultimately work with primary market research and really understand the impacts. And last but not least, there are a few operational changes that are required and that Michael, Nicole, and team are more than happy to help and support with Rivenar's solution. A few other thoughts. If you consider developing a token-based pricing model, I'm going to rush through these, but happy to discuss in the Q&A. So what is the actual pricing metric and what are the models that you want to include, right? Is it going to be purely a credit-based one? Is it going to be a hybrid model? And what are those metrics that you're including here? Are there formulas or these multipliers being used? What do these formulas look like? Are there different, some of our clients actually use different token types, particularly in combination with AI, which tends to have much higher variable costs, of course. How do you actually forecast token usage accurately? And how do you track and monitor and act on that usage? That's both from an internal perspective, so from a sales perspective, but then also from a customer perspective, how do you enable this monetization? How do you price the tokens, right? Is it a one-on-one translation? Very interesting use case. If you sell into different countries, is there some type of exchange rate of tokens that you apply, or do you offer different token models for each country or for each region? What is the validity? Mention that. And of course, in relation to how do you deal with wastage or token rollover, and how do you deal with overages? But then also internally, who's going to take care of this entire system? Who defines, for example, the forecasting pieces? Who defines when you change metrics, when you change formulas? And last but not least, Michael's favorite topic, revenue recognition and incentives, right? How do you actually make sure the sales reps get paid for their effort and align product usage with incentives? Which leads me to the last point. I'm just going to flash one overview slide here. Happy to go through that in more detail in the Q&A. When you implement, once you figure out your packaging strategy, once you figure out the right pricing model and the right pricing level, independently if you talk about a token-based pricing model or if you talk about consumption-based, subscription plus usage hybrids, once you're through with that effort, you definitely have to go through a detailed customer migration exercise, come up with a plan and a strategy. You have to have a very hard look at your sales incentives and your compensation system and making sure that your reps actually get paid the way they should get paid. And last but not least, you need to make sure customer success is in a position to actually drive these new revenue models and make sure there's that you have the right software in place, the right systems in place to enable those. And I just want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So gonna wrap here. If you guys are interested in any of the material, send me an email. Happy to share. If you want to stay in touch after this conversation, happy to take a lot of these discussions offline as well. So with that, Michael, opening it up to Q&A. And I can't hear you, but
no, right. I know. It's you know me. I was trying to be quiet while you were talking. Overcome the coughing fits. Thank you. Fantastic session as always. A lot for people to think about. I definitely have some questions in mind, as you hinted at. But I do want to make sure that everybody in the audience has a chance to ask questions. So whether or not you want to do it in the chat or the Q&A tab, jump in. I will put in a quick plug for Philip's YouTube channel. This is his own passion project. It's a separate thing, but that's how much Philip loves pricing, and talking about it is that he's doing it all the time. So a lot of really good and interesting videos there. And we did put Philip's LinkedIn into the chat in the platform. So definitely connect with him if you have more questions. But Philip, I'll start with one. Obviously, as you've described, there are lots of different models there, lots of good thinking around how you go about implementing a token-based model. But from what you've seen from the folks that you work with, what has been the biggest challenge to organizations actually moving forward with implementing token? Is it more of a business decision or something else?
I think it's actually upfront understanding what we're trying to solve for. Right, this discussion around what are we trying to reduce churn? Are we trying to get new customers? What are we trying to do here? And all these things would likely lead to different answers, right? If you want to acquire new customers, you need a simple model that a sales rep can pitch literally in an elevator. If that's what you really, really want and need, probably you don't want to start with a token-based pricing model. For mature customers and for mature segments that you want to entice to try new product offerings, and your product portfolio has grown tremendously, and you're more of an incumbent, and you want to entice folks to upsell, cross-sell, reduce churn, fantastic model. Likewise, what metrics you use has a lot to do with what you're trying to accomplish, with the amount of risk that you're trying to take on, and also with how well you know your customers and your segments. So they're kind of all these elements are important. It's typically where businesses don't really know what they're trying to solve for, and they just say, well, we probably need to work on our pricing somehow, where it takes a little bit more time to align on what would best in class actually look like for them, and what is the function that we're trying to solve for.
Is there a bit of a chicken and egg here with folks feeling a lot of pressure from customers to introduce AI functionality that can be a very expensive offering, and trying to balance that with the right model? Are you seeing more adoption of token-based models for AI? Obviously, you presented a lot of examples, but what do those discussions look like when it comes to moving forward?
Yeah, with AI, that's always a very interesting discussion. We always see that AI is a means to an end. So particularly in the beginning days of AI, software companies just slapped the label AI on it and said, "Hey, can we charge more for this?" And we time and again just found no, they're not paying for AI. And by the way, it's that label is becoming pretty commoditized these days. The question is, what is AI doing for you? And really measuring the impact. And I think that's where all these interesting pricing models, the outcome-based pricing models, or these work-based pricing models come in. Really understand, where does value come from? Having that value discussion early is absolutely key.
Great. And yeah, I mean, we've seen this with SaaS too, right? Like, the rising cost of SaaS, the rising cost of offering. So I think, having that flexibility to introduce new models, new pricing, is definitely an advantage. Because you raised the issue, it is my favorite topic, because it does seem to come up a lot when we talk to prospects and customers about revenue recognition when it comes to tokens. And obviously there are issues of predictability, both from a end customer perspective of what are my costs going to be investing in this, balancing revenue versus recurring revenue from a producer perspective. What are some of the big revenue recognition questions or issues that you're hearing discussed around tokens?
Yeah. So interestingly, we don't hear that question very often. I know you guys hear it a lot, but I think it might have to do with the fact that there's this misconception that you buy tokens and they're valid forever. Then of course you got a massive issue. I think the airlines figured that out in the 1980s with the miles, that they become a massive liability as well for their balance sheets, right? I just got pinged by American Airlines yesterday telling me that all my credits, all my miles expired, and I could just buy them back for X amount. So they became a bit smarter around the validity of tokens, of credits, and I think ultimately that's the answer as well. So if you have, let's say, contracts with your customers over 2 or 3 years, and you see a standard usage pattern of your software, I think then the way that you recognize those revenues have to reflect that pattern that you see in the past to some degree. And you probably, when you implement token-based pricing model, you want to have a good look in the mirror after year one and see, does this actually hold up, right? Is this still the right way to compensate? Which, by the way, I'm always surprised by how often companies change the revenue model, but they never really think how that might impact the sales reps. Yesterday, I was with a software company that said, well, we have 40% churn. And we said, oh, so how are reps compensated? Well, they get essentially paid for new sales. So there's no component whatsoever that says, are these customers actually going to be with the company at the end of the year? There's a kind of onboarding period of 3 months. If they're there after 3 months, the reps get paid. And after double clicking, yes, there are anecdotes around reps extending that sales and onboarding process. They get paid, and then the customer drops. So really aligning, what are you trying to solve for? If it's retention, you probably want to make sure that your reps target the right customers with the right product, and they don't oversell aggressively. That's the other kind of thing with token-based pricing, right? So you want to make sure that the packages get right size and that customers don't end up with all this wastage that they have to pay for, which then leads into this revenue recognition question as well, like who's to blame and who has to pay the bill.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like this is a much bigger topic than we have time for today, and we'd obviously love to have you back to talk more about that. But there are accounting principles that apply here. This isn't necessarily a new concept. It might be newer in software, but for example, your example of Dave & Buster's, gift cards in general are a form of token, right? It's buying in. Whether or not that will expire or not, will determine revenue recognition and when, right?
Yeah, and I will add, Michael, when subscription-based pricing came up, right? Yes, there was a revenue recognition challenge that everyone eventually figured out, right? Nobody says you have to migrate all your customers overnight to token-based pricing, right? So you can pilot this out, you can do tests, you can see, how do actual usage patterns change. and how are the predictions that we have based on market research and customer research? How do they actually come to life based on implementation, all these good things? So
great. And you mentioned the Salesforce example of just putting a line in the ground saying it's $2 per conversation. What thoughts do you have around best practices for price optimization once you get going with tokens? You touched on it a little bit earlier, but how do you go about taking that data and then really refining what your model looks like?
Yeah, so I think the Salesforce piece is a little bit like this Sam Altman pricing methodology of pricing by gut feel. I don't think there was that much market research invested into it, but then again, you have to start somewhere, right? And particularly in the software space, I recall the wild 2010s and 2000s companies had absolutely no monetization strategy whatsoever. The idea was let's grab market share and we figure out the monetization model later on. I think also now from what I heard over the last years, the tone has shifted from, hey, we try to optimize overall growth and overall revenue to we need to optimize for profitability. So a lot of our clients get pressure from the investors, from VC funds, and from PE firms to actually maximize profitability. So I think the pressure to think about getting pricing right is increasing. So to your point, how do we think about it? You have to do a little bit of homework and a little bit of research, and as mentioned before, you then have to also understand what are the implications. If you create new packages, yes, you can upsell, but if you create smaller packages, there's a downsell risk. So do you mitigate that? How do you mitigate that, right? Are the packages designed based on segment needs? Do you actually understand your customer segments, and how do these features and benefits fit to those segment needs? Like all those are questions that there's, again, tons of tools and methods out there that help you provide answers and also quantify the impact with a very high degree of accuracy, so you don't have to make this a guessing game.
Great. We do have a question from Aaron. I'm not sure if this is squarely in your wheelhouse, but we'll give it a try. He says, I realize this is a broad question. What tools are used to present these more complex models in such a way that the customer will understand and buy, and the salesperson builds confidence in the selling? For example, are there good tools that can help the selling of these models? And I know you presented some of the SmugBug example of the very complex chart and then breaking it down, but other ways of presenting those models that make it easy for both the purchaser and the seller to make sense of it?
I feel like in terms of token-based pricing, that's more like a pitch for you all, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, your software doesn't per se reduce the complexity, but I think that's where we enter into discussions with our clients and the clients with their customers as to what amount of complexity is desirable, right? So if we end up with token-based pricing models, can we have 5 different price metrics in there? Can we have 12 that doesn't? That I introduced in the beginning? What's the additional benefit of being more precise in your pricing versus confusing the customer, right? That's a little bit the trade-off question. But yeah, we don't have a silver bullet. We don't have like one method that says, hey, this will simplify the way that it has to be presented to your sales reps or to your customers. I will say, though, that your sales reps and your customers must be part of the journey. Right? They're the ones that are selling, they're the ones that are buying, so they have to be involved in the bread baking process to make it all stick.
Fantastic. Well, I think that's probably a good point to wrap up your session, Philip. Thank you, as always, for joining us. If you have questions for Philip, we've got his LinkedIn information in the chat in the platform. I'll also add a link to his YouTube professional pricing page momentarily. Thank you, as always, Philip. Look forward to our next conversation. But thank you for being here today.
Likewise. Yeah, and you all feel free to reach out if there are any questions that Michael and I didn't discuss. More than happy to take this offline.